Hey everyone, great to meet you. I'm Ayush. I'm one of the co-founder and CEO of Huddle01. Thank you so much, Fluence team. It's always an honor to be speaking here. Been always be a part of DePIN Day, and it's one of the best events which we ever go to in terms of DePIN to understand about infrastructure, about the network, about tokenomics, and all the other things. Today I'm going to talk about what we have been building. So Huddle01 is a DePIN network for real-time communication. What we do here right now, it's RTC, it's real time. Just doing this in a digital environment is where the whole game changes. And the infrastructure which we use that right now is essentially AWS, Azure, GCP, and all the others. When you do a Zoom call, a Microsoft Team call, a Google Meet call, or when you do any kind of communication with a GPT and everything else, it's all RTC. So talking a bit more about it, these are a couple of categories which have been created. You have heard a lot about compute. Fluence have been leading from front on that direction. In terms of storage, there is Filecoin being an OG DePIN for a long, long time. And there are a couple of now blockchain which have been built, particularly L1s, completely only for DePIN. And DePIN is a new swarm of wave which has been created over the last couple of years in itself. In that, for the last 4 years, we have been trying to create a new category in itself, which we call as RTC, which is real-time communication. And in this category now, there are more and more projects coming into picture and trying to essentially decentralize the way communication happens right now. RTC already has been serving a multi-billion-dollar market. If you've seen any kind of thing which we do right now in terms of communication, in different categories, be it in a robotics category, in IoT, essentially in video conferencing, in audio conferencing, live streaming, and other things. Everything requires a real-time communication in general. And this market will keep on increasing. The whole idea is that for humans to essentially communicate better, to collaborate better, and to innovate better, you require communication to be much, much more latency, have a better latency, have a better performance, and have a better privacy. Now, this is the problem which happens in the current infrastructure right now. When we do an RTC, this is really high operational cost. That's the reason why we started Huddle01 back 4 years. Essentially, it was COVID, peak COVID time. We were doing a Zoom call, essentially, and we realized that while doing a Zoom call, all the calls were routing through a central server which was in US. While doing so, the call quality was so bad that people had to use Zoom in tandem with something like Telegram or WhatsApp just to understand what did the other person say, because the latency was supremely, supremely high. And that's where we realized that the problem is not with Zoom, the problem is not with Teams, the problem is with the underlying infrastructure on which it is built. And that infrastructure right now is completely controlled by these data centers. And that's why we have not innovated a lot in communication. We have went from the Skype days, essentially, to the days of Zoom, where the thing which has improved is the number of screens, but what has not improved is the immersive way in which we communicate. The latencies are so high that if you are doing a call in Bangkok right now, a Zoom call, you'll not get connected to a server in Bangkok because there are no servers in Bangkok. You'll get connected to a server in North Virginia, which is miles and miles and miles away. And that's what we need to change. Right now, that's the reason why we do a call in a 2D screen environment and we are not able to do a super immersive based calls. The third problem is that the calls are not, they are just transport encrypted. They're not content encrypted. That means your calls can still be seen by the servers. When you do a call right now on Zoom, when you do a call on Google Meet, these are just transport encrypted calls. These are not content encrypted. And that means all of your calls, whatever you do right now, is completely can be seen by the servers itself because that's where the decryption happens. And the fourth and the most important thing is the value extraction. All the value which is being accrued is being taken either by the platform itself or by these data centers. Essentially, whatever intellectual content which we are talking in a digital environment, none of that value accrues back to us, which essentially could be changed because now we have a much better infrastructure which could be used to power these essentially real-time communication networks. This is something which I wanted to talk about a bit, and this is something which Cloudflare essentially had called out on AWS while both being a centralized players, is the egress cost. The egress cost essentially means the cost which means data out costings. How much data out cost happens when you put any data onto AWS right now. So when we do a real-time communication call on Zoom, on Teams, or any other place, just a call for 2 people for 1 hour takes more than 1.5 Gbps of essentially upload onto AWS. Now, interestingly, uploading the data on AWS is free, but essentially taking that data out is supremely expensive. And what's the most interesting part here? That AWS pays $1 to an ISP provider, but it charges 80x as a multiplier when it gives that same thing to Zoom. So just for routing those audio and video packets, just for brokering that deal, it takes an 80x multiplier. So the price which you pay for Zoom right now could be much, much lower in terms of subscription fees if we just solve this egress costing, which is nothing but brokering the overall bandwidth, which can be done by the edge-based networks which we have right now. And this is what is happening in US, Canada, and a couple of other places. And this is the kind of, and there have been a lot of, GDPR has been trying, European Union has been trying to figure out a ways. They have been lodging complaints, making sure that the way the egress cost could be, the data monopoly could be broken. But unfortunately, the bottom-up infrastructure is still not built to make sure that we can still do this in a proper fashion. Now, this is one of the points which I wanted to talk about, that how much money essentially AWS charges just in terms of DT cost. So if you see right now, just the instance cost is coming near $0.4 if you're doing a call of 8 speakers and 20 listeners. But if you just see the costing of data transfer, it's insanely high. It's $403. And that's the reason why TikTok Live or all the other platforms are trying to make sure that they build their own data centers. But the problem is that you cannot build data centers easily. It is a massive investment exercise. And all of these networks requires a people-powered or a bottom-up infrastructure. And this has been a problem happening for a long, long time now. And not just on costing, but also on performance. The performance is also not that great, and you need to make sure that you need to decrease the latency to have a much better performance for the call to become more like an Iron Man style call, where essentially I can do a call with you, it looks like a metaverse-centric call, and I can have a much more immersive experience. This is where come in. We have been building Huddle01 DRTC network for a long, long time now, where the whole idea is that if 100 people are in this room, if Tom has a good internet connection, Tom's laptop can become a node, and that can power the call of all of us, essentially. Right now, the bandwidth has been increasing year by year by year. We have reached a level where we are now at 5G-based connections. We are looking forward to a 6G-based connection. Starlink has come into picture, and you don't require data centers anymore for bandwidth-related tasks. It could be done in a bottom-up fashion, in a bottom-up infrastructure, and that's what we have been building. This leads to a much better, much cheaper costing, because now there is no monopoly in terms of data routing cost. There's a better performance, better scalability, and leads to a better end-to-end privacy as well, because there's no incentive for you to decrypt all, to be able to decrypt those packets, and you're able to essentially add FHE and all the different kind of encryption layers on top of these packets so that the routing becomes much more efficient and better. And the whole ROI, or all the money which is getting routed towards AWS and GCP gets routed towards you, essentially, which changes the whole game altogether. And to do this, I think one very interesting talk, fireside panel, which Juan and Tom had right now was regarding DePIN, and why in DePIN you require not just to build the supply side of the picture, but essentially build the demand side yourself first. And that's what we did. The reason why it took 4 years for us to essentially build this whole network was because we started building the demand ourselves. We built our own app, which is similar to Zoom. It runs, it's been live right now. It has done more than 4.5, 5 million minutes of meeting. It's been live. Essentially, it's faster, it's cheaper, it has all the features which Zoom and Google Meet has, and has been used by a lot of Web3 people, and it is being used by a lot of people even right now. It has done more than 100,000 minutes of meeting. And right now, we have started essentially getting subscriptions for that as well. Feel free to try it out. You might like it a lot. The second is Farhouse. That's another app which we have built, which is a Clubhouse on Farcaster. That means you can do all the things you do on Clubhouse or on X Spaces completely on Farhouse itself. Supremely scalable. 100,000 people can join the calls. can have a good experience. And it also has this Web3 primitives. That means you can do tipping, you can do token gating, and a lot of other things as well. And essentially all of these two apps, Huddle Meet and Farhouse, these are production grade ready apps, has passed the mom's test, meaning that anyone can use it. Anyone, my mom, anyone else, parents can use this app because it's supremely easy to use. There's an optionality to use Web3 wallets, but you don't have to use Web3 wallets. You can use your sign-in, you can do a guest login and all those things as well. What we did after that was that we just wrapped all of these client apps into essentially an SDK and gave that to people. By doing so, we started powering all the SocialFi apps and social graphs you're seeing right now. So any apps you see on Lens protocol, which has an audio feature sets into it, that's being powered by Huddle01. Apps you see on Farcaster, which has an audio component to it, is powered by Huddle01. Apps you see in another things like CyberConnect or any other social graphs is being powered by Huddle01. Same happens in the case of gaming. When people are playing game with each other, you require to have an audio routing with each other. And that's where we have a Unity SDK, making sure that anyone can have an audio in-game in itself. You don't require Discord anymore. You can just have inside your own app, which completely changes the game, has a better costing, easier to use, and it basically makes it so easy that our SDKs are very consumer developer centric focus, because we first built a consumer app and then wrapped it into SDK, making the experience so much better for anyone who's using it. We have been getting revenue. We have been doing revenue on SDKs as well. The charges are $4 for every 1,000 minutes, which is much cheaper than any centralized player out there in the market for the video, and $1 for the audio part of things. And yeah, this essentially has led us to have more than 9 million minutes of meetings so far on the overall infrastructure already before the network even being live. And now we are essentially making sure that this network, when people run this network itself, it doesn't necessarily just have a supply side of it, but essentially has a demand side of it. So your incentive and the rewards are much more than just block rewards. It's actual revenue, it's actual traction, it's actual routing, it's actually routing of minutes of meeting and making sure it's a very impactful, sustainable architecture which has been built. These are all the apps which already have been using Huddle01 for different use cases. So we have been doing a lot of things in traditional use cases as well. That means healthcare, edtech, live commerce, you name it, any kind of thing which requires an audio and video essentially uses the infrastructure of Huddle01 via the SDKs, via the app, or via the network itself. The whole idea in future is to also do this emergent kind of things like wallet-to-wallet calling. I can call from my ENS to your ENS, from my MetaMask to your MetaMask. So we are also figuring out ways on how the communication can evolve now. If we have solved the problem of latency, how can we make sure that we can just make sure that it becomes very immersive and very new way to communicate rather than just the way which we do right now using Google Meet and Zoom and all the other places. We essentially also, so this is live, this is the app which we have. You'll figure it out that it's very easy. It's similar to Google Meet. The experience is so easy that you won't feel like you're using a new product altogether. And the good thing here is that you can record all of these calls over IPFS, over Filecoin, very easily, making the storage supremely cheaper. A lot of people already use Huddle01 right now because the storage there is extremely, extremely cheap as compared to that of Zoom, which essentially you have to charge, you have to pay after using 1 GB of cloud storage. And that's where we also have a great go-to market, because for people who require unlimited recordings, Huddle01's app makes a lot of sense. For people who want unlimited recordings in their own app, Huddle01 SDK makes a lot of sense, and that gives us a paveway or a pathway to make sure that it's very economical for anyone who's using it. This has been the trend in terms of how much data we are putting over Filecoin, and we'll be putting over Filecoin just for doing the storage part of things. And that's how we grow as a composable DePIN networks, where we'll make sure that all the data which is being stored, it gets stored over Filecoin, and that number is going to be in zettabytes as we keep on increasing in the real-time communication industry. This is the whole DRTC network economy right now. So I'll just talk about the whole section for 30 seconds. And this essentially was the most like we have to, like, it's a 30 people team, and it took us a lot of time to make sure that this whole looks sustainable, is sustainable, and works in the long term itself. So if you see here, On the side of the purple side, which is the client apps, which is the apps which have been using Huddle01, Huddle01 Meet, Farhouse, couple of other apps. There are 180 more apps built on top of us. These are all the clients. SDKs are the ones where essentially people are building on top of our own infrastructure using Unity SDK, using Flutter SDK, React Native, you name it. The third part essentially is the muscles of the network, which is the media nodes, which means you, all of us. Anyone here who is right now using, who essentially has good compute and a decent compute and a good bandwidth, that means around 200 Mbps, can power the calls now. And that calls could be powered by them rather than by the data center itself. And then on the green side, that means the dark green on the left side, is the orchestrate, which is the brain of the network, which makes sure that, okay, if the call is happening in Bangkok, you get connected to a Bangkok server or a Bangkok node. If the call is happening in Singapore, it's connected to a Singapore-based node, rather than all of that routing happening in a very overtly centralized and also a very age-old client-server architecture model. And this is how this whole economy essentially functions. Right now, we are at the stage where media nodes are live. You can run these nodes yourself. You can power the calls yourself. And this means that once you're doing a huddle call yourself, you might be earning from that huddle call yourself because essentially you are the one who is powering that. And this is what we call media nodes. It's a extremely like high density engineering which has gone into picture to make sure that we wrap all of this SFUs, which we call selective forward unit, the media servers, into your own pockets, into a bite-sized binary file, which you can use and you can power. And this has been in works for a couple of years now, and now this is the kind of requirements you need to have, and you will be able to power this yourself via your own laptops, a Raspberry Pi, a VPS, to make sure that your experience is pretty awesome. And in terms of communication, we're just starting it out. This whole game changes as we start moving from communication with humans to communication with agents, to communication between agents. And this whole paradigm is extremely interesting. You want to talk to an AI therapist, it becomes, you need to have a latency of less than 100 milliseconds. You need to talk to, get a suggestion from a LLM as it starts increasing. So you need to have a real-time AI. And real-time AI will become a real thing because our communication with agents will keep on increasing from not just chat right now, which we do with the GPT or with a Perplexity or with a Claude, but will move towards audio. It will move towards video. It will move towards like much more immersive ways to communicate. And that's where this is the video. You might not be able to hear the audio here, but I'll just basically talk about what I'm doing here is that I'm just thanking all my community members in English to talk about that, thank you for joining the community. And then there are two AI agents here who are setting. One of them is undefined host. And that AI agent is able to real-time translate that into Hindi, into Russian, into a Turkish language, all in real time in a latency of 30 milliseconds. And this is where we are moving towards. We're moving towards a way in which in terms of this caption, you don't require a text-based caption now. You essentially can do that in a real-time fashion, which completely changes the paradigm of communication. And this is where we are moving towards. An AI agent to a human interaction, an AI agent to an AI agent interaction, and a human to a human interaction, all within a latency of 100 milliseconds, and all making sure that the economy is being powered by you and yourself. This is our road to mainnet. We have been, our white paper unveil has happened. You might really like it. It's a 55-pager, dense white paper which talks about communication, how we have reached here, what have we done to reach here. We have been onboarding very early partners into it. We have opened a Huddle01 media node whitelist. You can essentially be a part of that whitelist. You can run these nodes yourself, join the Discord, you'll get the binary file, and you'll be able to run it. There is a testnet unveil, which we'll be doing in December. And then the nodes essentially is going live now in December itself, the testnet of it. And then we are starting with our own financial systems. Interestingly, when you essentially solve for communication, you can solve for anything bandwidth-related tasks. In bandwidth-related networks, the most difficult thing to solve is a cross-continental latency. You are in Thailand, I am in US. How can we do a call in less than 100 milliseconds in a people-powered network manner? And we have solved that. So once you solve that for communication, you can solve that for CDN. You can solve that for any other things which requires a low latency. You can solve that for an exchange where you require an order book mapping in less than 10 milliseconds of latency. So you can build one of the fastest decks using this infrastructure itself. So this moves beyond communication because of such powerful infrastructure which it is. This is our overall investors. We have been very fortunate to be backed by a lot of different DePIN experts in the space, one being one of the major ones. And that's the reason why our whole DNA has been very focused towards building this, this infrastructure in a very credible, neutral, open, neutral, and borderless, and censorship-resistant manner. And one of the biggest announcements is that we always organize Phil Bangalore. And Phil Bangalore is again happening this year as well, which is one of the biggest events which we do with Filecoin, Fluence, and all the other awesome partners always comes here. This is another picture of our whole team with Juan. And this is happening on 6th and 7th of December. So if you're in Asia, and if you will be in Asia for a couple of more days, would be awesome to have you here in this event on 6th and 7th of December. My team is here. Would love to chat with you regarding that as well. And yeah, that's about it. This is our Discord. This is our media nodes scanner. If you want to be a part of it, you can scan this. And thank you so much for listening in. And it's awesome to be here.
Thank you. We have a couple minutes for questions. Do we have any questions from the audience?
I was able to grasp a little bit, but I do want to actually understand that how the latency has been reduced so much in such a huge network.
Yeah, absolutely. So latency has reduced a lot because right now the way calls happen is the data centers are only in a couple of places in the world. And you cannot have data centers everywhere. You can have a distributed system, but you cannot have a decentralized system in itself. And building data center everywhere is very difficult. A small example is that if you use Huddle01 Meet right now, our own app, and if you use Zoom right now, you'll see the latency of Huddle01 Meet is much better than what of Zoom is. The reason is that we can get connected to a network which is much more nearer to you, rather than connecting to a server which is much more. So Zoom optimizes for making sure that they have a better economics. And the better economics is when you have more racks of data centers all across. So the biggest data center racks are in North Virginia, and that's where it's cheapest. So all your calls get routed through that server in that sense. In our case, we get connected to a node which is much more nearer to you. So the latency decreases a lot because your packets don't have to transfer all the way from here to a different continent altogether, and it gets connected to you, where you are the most nearest to. It's like having an Uber, and you having an Uber in the area where you are in Bangkok, but you don't get connected to a Uber which is much more like 50 kilometers away from you, which will take a lot of time to come. And that's the thing which we have built here in the supply side of the network.
That's fascinating. Thank you.
Awesome.
Other questions? Question, right here. Right here. Question there.
Hey, I have a question. You had in presentation also the use case of AI, that you can communicate with AI chatbot. And I'm curious because, like from my understanding, the models are usually actually run the audio part on the user device. So how are you actually like tackling this angle? I'm curious.
Yeah, that's a great question. So that happens when you're doing a normal chat-based communication. That's where you can do it on user's device. But as soon as you move to a very high bandwidth intensive task, something like ChatGPT has to use an infrastructure. Right now, they are using something called as Livekit, Livekit, which is a CPaaS solution, a communication platform as a service solution, which just wraps an SDK, gives to OpenAI, and that's how the whole architecture has been built so far. Now, the problem is with Livekit or with the other infrastructure is that these SFUs or these media servers are still located on data centers. It's still completely dependent on data centers, which can be given to people themselves. So the whole idea behind it is that media servers can be run by people themselves, which is not happening right now. So when you do a call with ChatGPT right now, you will notice that the latency when you are doing in Bangkok, a kind of communication will be higher. When you are, let's suppose, in States, it will be comparatively lower. And the whole reason is that it's not happening via your own device right now. It's being routed through these central servers when you move to an audio or to a video-based experience with these AI agents.
Anybody else? Yes, right here.
Hey, thanks for the talk. I guess I was just wondering which parts of this are open source, or all of the SDKs open source, the servers?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now you can just plug and play the SDKs. You can use the SDKs right now itself. It's open source, our SDKs. You can use it right away. We essentially, the first thing which we did was that we used the first SFU which was built in the past, which was Media Soup. So essentially we made sure that we are built on the top of these open source giants. So Media Soup did a fantastic job of making sure that the whole repository is completely open. So we use the Media Soup demo client, the demo app, and essentially made sure that becomes very scalable. So if you want to use it right now, you can do that, and you can build your own apps completely using the infrastructure itself. Same goes for the binary file as well. You can download the binary file. As soon as you get these media nodes, you can just download the binary file and can run it yourself as well. And the whole idea is that we want more and more people to build on top of Huddle01's network. And even the whole app which we have right now, Huddle01 Meet, a lot of the community people have actually built the transcription service or the caption service or the calendar or this different kind of scheduling services. And that's how we want to keep it, to make communication get out of hands of the overtly centralized players outright on the market. And that's why we also spend personally a lot of time in San Francisco to convince people like Zoom and others to essentially move out of that infrastructure which they are using and move to a people-powered bottom-up infrastructure. And that's how we can have that step function growth. And as Tom was talking about, having that burn and mint mechanism model so that your economy becomes very sustainable in nature.
Well, that transitions to exactly my question, which was the role of a token in your ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. So the role of the token is it's a work token. It's essentially powering bandwidth to your network. And that's the role which it plays in the overall realm of things. So if you want to use the network, that means you want to build any kind of audio and video apps on top of it, you need to pay $4 for every 1,000 minutes for using the video part of things, $1 for every 1,000 minutes for using the audio part of things. And that will happen in our own native token, which is essentially Huddle01 token. So it acts essentially as a payment token as well, and it acts as a work token as well for providing the service. So right now, if you run the media nodes yourself, you essentially earn 21% of the tokens till the TGE itself in terms of bootstrap rewards. And then the performance minting reward starts after the TGE during the mainnet, where you are actually powering these audio and video calls, and you keep on earning that. So right now you earn north of 500 tokens per day from the day you start running these media nodes to the time till the testnet ends. And then the mainnet phase, all the actually Farhouse-based calls, the Huddle01 Meet calls, or the calls which are happening on our Lens apps or on Farcaster apps, all get routed towards you based on your location, your geography, your availability, and all the other things.
And so then revenue that goes into the network basically buys those tokens?
Yes, absolutely.
Gotcha. Great. Question?
Hey there, thanks. I'm just kind of more curious about that use case, that you were talking about between the user and the AI agent potentially, because obviously we all know that that industry is getting bigger and bigger, right? But so I'm just like wondering on your kind of opinion, because it seems like that I don't know how much along other use cases, like this is some use case that you're counting on. But I would be just curious, how you approach it, because I guess you're fighting against two big trends, right? Like one big trend is basically like local compute, whether we are talking mobile phones, etc. And second thing is potentially just like as these models are progressing, I guess let's say the efficiency would be increasing. So it might be the case that eventually you would not really need to kind of do that communication between the phone of a user and a cloud, but localized as well. So I'm just wondering how you're approaching it. And also I think one other thing is that this is a problem that probably all the big tech will be jumping on, right? So I mean, you're competing with the big tech here as well. So I would be curious on your take on that, how you're approaching it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of just talking about the AI component of it, we have been seeing this problem happening a lot with GPT right now. For example, OpenAI, they started integrating LiveKit for a while, and then what they noticed was that they were facing latency issues in general. And what that made us realize was that this problem essentially of a decentralized versus distributed systems will always remain. And there are ways and there are infrastructures where decentralized infrastructure makes more sense in terms of performance as compared to distributed systems. And it's less pain. It's much more better performance because of the way internet or the WebRTC module or the WebRTC architecture has been built so far. WebRTC started as a peer-to-peer, like the protocol which we use for real-time communication was started as a peer-to-peer protocol by Google itself, similar to what they did with attention as all you need. But the problem was that to scale WebRTC or to scale real-time communication, we added these central servers on top of it. And that solved scalability, but what it didn't solve was performance or the latency issues. So yes, big tech are jumping on it. We are seeing Agora, one of the players, who is what they're trying to do is that they're trying to build their own distributed systems, making sure that people can run it themselves on their own. So edge-based competition has started coming into picture, you're right. What I'm seeing is that they're not using crypto economic primitives, which will make sure that I will not run a model myself or a node myself if I'm not getting incentivized to run that. And that's where crypto economic changes it. So I think the battle will happen on an edge-based network versus an edge-based network with the crypto economic primitives. It will be an interesting battle to have. Yeah.
Great. Well, let's give a round of applause to Ayush. Thank you for the...
Thank you.